I-dle, CRAVITY, NOWZ. These K-pop groups all have something in common. They all recently underwent a rebranding. Rebranding in marketing is the process of updating or changing a brand's identity, be it by a change in name, logo, slogan, visual, or verbal presentation. Today, we want to delve into what rebranding means for K-pop groups. And for that, we are now connected with our K-pop expert, Jeff Benjamin. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Jeff.
Hello. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining us on the show again. Now, let's start with the girl group I-dle, which sent off the G of their former name G-I-dle with a kind of funeral and have been continuing their successful career as a powerful K-pop idol group. So, Jeff, how do you assess the rebranding of I-dle?
Yeah, I-dle is a specifically very interesting situation because on one hand, they've kind of hinted that they've been interested in kind of changing the meaning of their team name. I believe it was right around their first full-length album, Never Die, I Never Die, that they were kind of removing the G a little bit or playing around with this idea that, you know, the G in G-idle stands for girl idol, or in Korean it's Yoja idol, which is female idol. So they were almost trying to say, we're not, you know, just for women, we're not just for one sex or one gender. We're actually trying to say that we're for everyone and we're representing all kinds of things. So G-idle hit recently a big milestone in hitting their 7th year together under their company. This is kind of the typical year that most groups renew their contracts or they renegotiate contracts, and they ended up re-signing with their current label, Cube Entertainment. And so I have a feeling this was probably one of their stipulations of being able to stay with the company, was that they wanted to sort of be able to take a bit more ownership with their name and say, you know, we want to change the name, we want to make it represent something a little bit different, in addition to probably better terms and better pays. But something tells me that specifically this 7-year anniversary really had something to do with just wanting to better represent what they think they represent as artists in that way.
I definitely agree with that. And they don't look like they're slowing down, as we recently reported that they won a grand prize recently as well. So, and it was one of their big grand prizes. They walked away with a couple, actually. But now, next, let's talk about CRAVITY, a group that you have spoken about, well, quite often, Jeff. So how did they undergo a rebranding?
Yeah, so CRAVITY kind of surprised fans, and actually it turns out it was quite a surprise to the members themselves. It wasn't a change in name or, you know, some members changing anything like that. They kind of just announced a change of concept and a change of the members that would be leading the group. So member Serim had been leading the group up until this point, but they kind of announced that CRAVITY would take a new turn as a group, and members Wonjin and Hungjun would become CRAVITY's new leaders. So taking it from kind of one member looking over 9 different members to now 2 members, kind of being able to look over a large group like this. But it wasn't necessarily like, you know, I-dle making a big change in terms of, you know, how they want to be viewed or who they are. It was more so about internally, it seems like they're going to kind of show a different side of themselves. They're going to show the potential, the growth that they have. And this comes 5 years into CRAVITY's career. So it's not as if CRAVITY has done a poor job or has not done well, but I think it almost feels like they wanted to sort of refresh and get themselves excited once again, and maybe get their fans excited again. The members did say that this news was kind of a surprise to them, especially the members, especially the leaders changing. But it seems to be kind of an exciting change, and I'm very curious to kind of see where this new style goes. CRAVITY was always a very strong, you know, hard-hitting group. This new video that they released with their 2nd full-length album, it's kind of a bit more real, bit more honest, bit more raw and grungy. So maybe we're going to see a more honest side of CRAVITY moving forward.
So you just touched upon it a little bit, but Jeff, why are these K-pop groups doing this? Why are they rebranding?
Yeah, there's kind of a couple things going on here, right? Is that I remember personally when I got into K-pop and really started watching it, especially in sort of that second generation of groups, there weren't as many groups coming out. This is like 2008, 2009, and a lot more groups kind of had the ability to experiment and try on different concepts and do different styles. You know, I remember my favorite group when I first got into K-pop was After School, and every single time they changed from hip hop to dance to you know, they did tap dancing, they did drum lines. They always brought something new, and I think you could experiment a bit like that because, you know, there wasn't as much competition, and these days, you know, it's really hard to kind of stand out as a group. And I think that's one of the big things is that a rebrand can kind of reestablish yourself in the market, try something, you know, new, try to reestablish yourself, especially if you're not feeling like you're getting the results that your team, you know, really wants to get.
Well, I guess the most important people to sort of respect in this situation are the fans. And so how are the fans reacting to this sort of rebranding of certain groups? And are you seeing maybe a difference between, let's say, the domestic fans versus the overseas fans?
Yeah, you know, I think it's a little TBD, and I love that you guys thought of this topic for today because I think this idea of branding, it's certainly happening a lot more, right? And I'm curious to see how this grows as maybe the year goes by or as maybe a couple years go by, because I think it's a little TBD, and I think the answer will kind of come in time to be determined and kind of see how these rebrandings go for these different artists. I know, for example, Treasure, who is the latest boy band under YG Entertainment, at the top of 2025, they announced that they would be going through a change in terms of their leadership, that every year or so they would be changing leaders. Every 1 or 2 years, the members would change and who was leading the group. And that was just sort of to refresh their ideas, to refresh the concepts, to refresh the focus. And, you know, this year was a big year for Treasure. They not only had their first US tour, they were able to release their first albums under a US label. So, you know, at least with international fans, I think we're seeing, you know, as long as, you know, this means good things, good opportunities, better chances for the future, I think no one will ultimately complain about it. But I think it's also needs to be seen a little bit because if everyone just kind of changes things when something's not working or they don't think they're being successful enough, it might get a little confusing. But for now, I think it's kind of, you know, lots of fans are trusting that this is the right reason. And ultimately, they're in love with the artists themselves and the people behind them. So whether they change their name, their concept, their sound, you know, hopefully they're going to still love the artist no matter what.
Right, but let's talk a little bit more about the potential concerns or risks. In some cases, there are groups that have to change their name inevitably as they move to a different agency. That was the case with Highlight and Bubugol or BB Girls. And also recently there was former NOWZ, which changed its name to NOWZ, and they haven't even debuted that long ago. So tell us a little bit about some of the concerns with rebranding.
Yeah, I mean, name recognition is huge. And I think especially, you know, those two examples you brought up with Highlights and BB Girls, who were formerly known as Beast and Brave Girls. These were very popular artists that had #1 hits, right? #1 albums. And I think this is kind of an unfortunate reality of kind of the industry and the music industry in general. And it's not limited to Korea, but many times the labels are not willing to give up the rights to the name or the artist's copyright, whatever it might be. We've seen some successful cases. For example, GOT7 under JYP was able to move successfully and use their name. I actually believe with Highlight, they were recently able to use the Beast name again, but you know, it's years after the fact that they specifically changed the Highlight upon moving labels. But it's tough because there's kind of that name recognition and you kind of almost have to reintroduce yourself or really hope that your music is going to reach people once again and that you're despite the fact that your name isn't there. There was, a great example was when Beyonce and Jay-Z released an album together, a joint album, but they released it under the Carters, which is their, Jay-Z's last name. But no one got alerted to this album coming out because people follow Beyonce, they follow Jay-Z, but they don't follow the Carters. So it's always tricky, even if you're the biggest artist in the world, and throw that now to NOWZ, who changed from to Nowadays, who changed to NOWZ. I love the name Nowadays, but also maybe they weren't feeling like the name Nowadays was giving them the recognition they want. So, refresh, get people excited. You can get a couple more headlines because your name's NOWZ, and see kind of what happens from there. I think it can kind of go both ways, and it's there could be benefits and also potential downsides both ways. So it's really interesting, especially to see kind of what happened with NOWZ, because their new single is quite good, but I think it's almost like they really wanted people to pay attention then with this song.
Right.
I see what you're saying there. And just quickly, last but not least, how do you think the process of rebranding will affect the sustainability of K-pop artists?
Well, you'd like to think, right, that it's going to be a positive thing ultimately. A group like Highlight, for example, they've had a long career. It's been wonderful to see how even as they changed from Beast to Highlight, they were able to establish their own company, and they've been able to kind of continue, bring in trainees onto their company, debut a new boy band in The Wind. But I think it always runs the risk of just kind of everything feeling, for lack of a better word, I guess, like too without having like the human side and the heart to it anymore. I think if a group can just change their names 5 million times, it just kind of loses a bit of meaning like that. And I will say, just for what it's worth, is that it seems like the bigger labels really don't tend to change their artist names too often. They really kind of commit and invest in those artists. But I understand if it's, smaller labels are able to do that or trying to do something new. But yeah, I guess a name is a name. Anyone can change their name, right? But I think ultimately we just got to remember the humans, the artists that are involved, and hopefully keep that in focus. No matter if you change your name, your concept, your sound, whatever it might be, don't forget there's a lot of hardworking people behind those names.
Right. All right. Thank you very much, Jeff. I hope you'll stay Jeff until the next time we talk to you, and have a great day.
You too, guys.
Or
Happy
good
summer.
night. And thank you, Walter. We're going to see you back here tomorrow.
See you very soon.